Welcome to the Startup Women podcast. Today's guest is Connie Lo, one of the co-founders of 3 Ships Beauty. 3 Ships is a natural and vegan skincare company on a mission to make clean beauty accessible for all women. Connie and Laura bootstrapped their business in 2017 with just $4,000 in savings and hand-making products in their kitchen. Fast forward to today, 3 Ships is a next-level natural formula skincare brand that delivers results. Not only are they disrupting the clean beauty and natural skincare space, but they're advocating to define what these words truly mean so the entire industry can transform and grow with clarity. Connie and Laura are committed to uncensorship, leadership, and partnership. They are 3 Ships. 3 Ships is now carried in more than 400 retailers across North America, and they've been featured on Dragon's Den and are loudly bragged about in publications such as Elle, Cosmopolitan, The Globe and Mail, Allure, and more. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mallory. That was such a nice intro.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have you here. You are definitely top of my list when we look at founders that are doing really cool things in the space.
Thank you. That means a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. On this show, we like to get into the moments that we're not necessarily talking about all the time. It might be those pivotal moments in a business where it feels like you weren't sure if you were going to make it. Maybe it is the moment that everything changed. And sometimes it's just like these little anecdotes that a lot of new founders don't get to hear because it doesn't make it in the big story.
Oh yeah, we have tons of those.
Yeah,
I can share.
I'm sure in the product space you have had your fair share of headaches. Before we get into that moment though, I really love your founder story and your co-founder story with Laura. I would love if you can kind of tell us about that first meeting and spoiler alert, like I just love that it was kind of a blind date setup for you guys.
It's like a meet cute.
Yes, totally.
So Laura and I, we actually weren't friends before we started the company. So we were introduced through a mutual friend. My friend Brandon, in middle school, actually went to school with him. And I remember when we'd walk home from school, I would tell him like, hey, I'm going to try making this new skincare concoction tonight. Because like I was really into natural skincare in grade 6. And like,
as most
people are, like literally mashing up bananas and like egg whites and green tea and like lathering on my face and lying on the couch with cucumbers over my eyes.
Yeah.
And then I'd, test something the next day, be like, okay, that didn't work. I'm going to try this next time. And he just remembered me as that girl in school that was obsessed with skincare. And so I went to university. We like went to different schools, but he went to University of Toronto with Laura and they did chemical engineering together. And when she was graduating, she was telling Brandon that, she wanted to make a natural makeup remover because she was tired of using coconut oil, which was really messy on her counter, but she really liked how well it worked. So he was like, wait, you should talk to my friend Connie. She would just be someone really good to get ideas from. So she reached out to me. We met up for what was meant to be like a 30-minute dinner at a sushi restaurant. And it literally became like a 3.5-hour, 4-hour business co-founder first date meeting is what we call it, where we overstayed our stay at the restaurant and actually got kicked out and had to move to the Starbucks across the street and like continue working. But yeah, it was just like we hit it off from that first day. She showed me her minimum viable product. And then we just had so many ideas. And we also had mutual frustrations with the beauty industry of like how everything's so overpriced, everything's greenwashed. It's such a confusing industry. And we just felt like we could do something about it. So at the end of that dinner, Laura was like, do you want to just be my co-founder on this? She had been wanting a co-founder and just couldn't find the right person. Whereas for me, I'd always wanted to start my own business, but never had the right idea. So it was like kismet. And we pooled together our savings, the $4,000 that you mentioned, and we started literally the next day.
I love that so much. I feel like it really does remind me of a romantic relationship, right? Because some people are friends first. Some people just go on that first date and they just hit it off. In the business side, like I feel like in a romantic relationship, you do kind of have, this slow trust building that naturally happens because you're not really like handing over your life to that person the next day. But in business, you are like a little bit, right?
Yeah.
It's a lot more intimate very quickly. How did you guys build that trust early on?
Oh my gosh, it's tough. Well, the first thing I'll say is when you're thinking about finding a co-founder, I think a lot of people will tend to gravitate towards finding someone who's similar to them. And oftentimes that means that you have similar skill sets, which like actually isn't ideal because then you have two of the same person or two of the same skill set and you're missing the other half. So something that Laura and I realized from that first sushi date is that we're actually complete opposites. And that's really important because like you can cover off opposite ends of the business, but we also realized that we had completely aligned life values. And I think that's where the trust comes from. Because like when we were on our first co-founder date, we talked about how we were raised very similarly. We were both raised to work really hard. We both really value integrity, which is one of our company values. Like our personal values became our company values: hustle, integrity, curiosity, and compassion. So like I would say the first step, even before you start working with someone, is try to understand what their values are, because that might already tell you, okay, this might not be the person for me to work with.
Right.
And then after we started working together, it's tough because like we were both working 9 to 5s and then only meeting up in the evenings twice a week and then working one full day of the weekend. So like you don't have that much time together. But something that we did is we wrote user guides. Did I talk to you about this in the past? I can't
No, I don't think so.
So a user guide is, like when you get a new piece of tech, like a Dyson Airwrap or something,
Yep.
and it comes with a user manual.
Yep.
You're like, okay, like I kind of understand how to use this
Yeah.
if you bother reading it. So a user manual in a work setting is kind of the same thing. So you write a couple page document that tells people a little bit about you, how you like to work with people, your optimal times of day, like maybe your best energy, like peak work times, how you like to give and receive feedback, how you like to communicate, things like that. And we like both wrote them and then handed them to each other. So like for a silly example I like to give is when we first started working together, I'm someone that loves to use exclamation marks.
Okay.
And I'm like very like,
I'm the same for
okay,
sure.
nice.
Yeah, yeah,
okay,
yeah.
we get along.
Yeah.
Versus Laura, on the other hand, even though she's a really nice person, she just doesn't use exclamation marks. She loves a good period. And I remember when we first started communicating, especially, like not in person,
Yeah.
because we worked our 9 to 5s, I'd be like, oh my God, is she mad at me or something?
Right,
And
like,
then
what
she
did
was
I
probably
do?
like, why is she so obsessed with me? And so in our user guides, it was really
Yeah.
clear. It's like, oh, like just because I use periods doesn't mean that I'm not enthusiastic about something. That's just the way I communicate. So that's one example of how you like learn to
Yeah.
communicate. And like when you communicate well, that builds trust. So that's something. I think a partnership agreement is also like a non-sexy thing that people don't really talk about, but we created one right away.
Love
So
that.
it listed like what would happen if like, certain things happened, and then who would own what and things like that. So like it's kind of like a prenup where you like write it and then you forget about it, but it's insurance for both sides.
Yeah, I always think of with contracts, it's like it lets you be like the good guy, right? Because
Yeah.
it's like, well, the contract can be the bad guy if it comes down to it. At least you almost have that third party that is something you
So
came
true.
to together.
Yeah, and like we wrote it together and we both felt like it was fair. And honestly, it's not something that either of us has thought about since we first wrote it, but it's good to just know you have it.
Totally. I love the user guide because it feels like you're just getting a shortcut really to knowing each other. The things that you would slowly find out. It's like, oh, Connie's emailing me at 8 p.m. I guess maybe she does like to work or she gets creative at night.
True. And then on the flip side, the person reading it doesn't feel like they need to reply right away because they're like, oh, that's just when Connie likes to email. It doesn't mean that she's expecting a response. Or like same thing with Slack. Like I'll try my best to schedule messages if I'm working in off hours so the team doesn't feel like they need to see it. But I've told them in my user guide multiple times, like, okay, just because you get a Slack message from me on the weekend does not mean you should reply. Like, and actually
Yeah.
what Laura and I do is if someone replies on the weekend, we'll usually reply back being like, why are you online? So, but the user guide's great. And actually we have everyone in our company who joins write a user guide. And then they also read everyone in the company's user guide.
Okay, fun. I was just going to ask that. So now you guys are a team of over 20 people. So you have everyone do that when they on board. That is so
and
cool.
everyone has said that it's like the most fun thing that they do in their onboarding, and they actually have said that they've shared it with their like loved ones and their friends and family and gotten them to like read it and see like, oh, is this actually accurate? And some of our team members said that they got their partners to write it. So like it's a really fun idea. I'd recommend it if you haven't done one yet.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so you guys start. What year was this in?
So 2017 is when we launched our previous brand, which was called New Body, and then we rebranded to Three Ships in 2020 with all these learnings from this like handmade, more granola kitchen brand that we sold at farmers markets, and then rebrand to Three Ships.
Okay, so 2020 we go through the rebrand. Winter 2021. This is kind of where you guys have, you're prepping for your big holiday sale. Most product businesses know that Black Friday, holidays, Christmas, all of that is a big time for product-based businesses. Tell me a little bit about what happens in winter of 2021 for you guys.
Oh my gosh, it's like forever ingrained in my memory.
Yeah, bring back the trauma for us, please.
Oh God. Okay, so even though everything for Three Ships is manufactured in Toronto, with the exception of our eye masks, which are made in South Korea, our packaging was coming from overseas, and that tends to be the way that beauty businesses run. It's just you can't find a good packaging supplier in North America at a good cost. So everything was ready at our manufacturing site in Toronto, like all like the liquids and like cleansers, serums, creams, but the product boxes were arriving in Vancouver. And typically what happens is when the product packaging arrives in Vancouver, We then put it on rail, so like the train, and then that goes from Western Canada over to Ontario. It gets unloaded at our manufacturer, and then the manufacturer puts our bottles into the boxes, so like the bottles of like the creams and everything, and puts in the boxes, and then they ship it to our warehouse, and then from our warehouse we then ship to our customers. So it's like a little, lots of steps in there, but usually it's pretty smooth. So what happened that year is there was this massive flood that literally wiped out the highway that connected Vancouver to the rest of Canada. I don't know if you remember this, but I'll forever remember.
I feel like I wasn't personally victimized by it.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, raise your hand if you're personally victimized by the flood, the great flood of 2021. But yeah, it literally wiped out the only access point. And so this was like a few weeks before Black Friday.
Right. And also pause for a second. 2021, we're also peak pandemic.
Yeah.
So you've also been almost 2 years into already probably and adjusting with the pandemic.
Yeah.
Like I'm sure that also, you had to change how so you're almost probably already like tired of all the changes and adapting you've had to do, right?
Oh my gosh, yeah. And like, I mean, during that time, like my co-founder, she was diagnosed with a brain tumor. She had brain cancer, and like we went through that. We grew a team from the two of us, so I think around 5 people at the time. We had stopped making all of the products by hand in my parents' basement and had started to outsource manufacturing to some local manufacturers, but we still had some manufacturing done in-house at my parents' basement. So like there was packaging everywhere. It's just like a very
like how
messy,
in-house is literally
like literally
in a house,
in basement house.
Yes, in parents' basement.
Thanks, mom and dad.
Yeah.
But it was just so chaotic already.
Right.
So already we were like, okay, this is tough. And then this flood just made it so much harder. And what most companies did at that time, especially small businesses, were they just thought, okay, there's nothing you can do about this because there's no way you can get your packaging out. Like you literally cannot unless you had a ton of money and you could air freight out something. So like put your packaging on a plane and then fly it over to where you need to go. Mm-hmm. But that would have cost like over $40,000. And at the time, and even now, I would say like it would just not be worth it for us. But we also knew that Black Friday would have been a really, really important sale period that we didn't want to miss. So another option that we were thinking of is, okay, well, a lot of people are saying just don't do anything. That was never going to be something that we considered. And so then at the end of the day, what ended up happening is Laura's dad and uncle, they actually live in Western Canada. And we asked them, and they we voluntold them to rent a 26-foot U-Haul truck from Vancouver. They actually got the last truck.
No way.
And then we convinced them to go to the port where all of our packaging was. And like we emailed them all the documents that proved that like we were the owners of the packaging. And they brought it to that warehouse, showed them the documents, and they were like, please let us load this truck with the packaging.
They were like, you don't look like Connie and Laura.
Yeah, and they were like, who are you?
Yeah.
And then luckily we convinced them. And then they actually drove the packaging down through the US border because that highway was fine. And so that was scary too, because crossing the border, we're like, what if we have to pay customs on these boxes? Like, I don't know. Like, what if they're like, you have to declare customs on like the value of the actual packaging?
Right, because it's not quite, it wasn't your product.
No, it wasn't finished goods. So luckily we didn't have to pay. But that was something Laura and I were really scared of because we're like, wait, if we did have to pay, then that might have just written off any of the like cost benefit that we would have gotten from not air freighting something. So luckily we didn't have to pay. They drove down through the US and then came up to Ontario and took them like a week.
Wow.
And then but because we got into a week of our timeline, we actually had to bring those boxes to my parents' house instead of to our manufacturer because they were like, there's not enough time. It was already Black Friday. And they didn't have enough time on their lines to like do it for us. So my whole team, which again was like 5 of us, plus my parents, so 7 people, we all just went to my parents' place and like put all of our boxes or bottles into the boxes, like thousands of products.
Right. And to clarify, we're not talking about like someone's ordered 6 products and it's going in the shipping box. We're talking every single individual product comes in a package box.
So like I think for context, I think we had maybe 12 to 15 SKUs at the time. So like individual types of products. So like a foaming cleanser, a gel cleanser, 3 serums, cleanser, things like that, et cetera, et cetera. So taking that packaging, like the bottle or the jar, and then putting that into the actual like product box that has the product name on it, the ingredient list, all of that, and then taking those boxes and then putting them in case packs.
Right.
So putting them in case packs, usually of 12, and then that's what went to our warehouse. So I think we stayed there for a couple of days, and this was already a couple of days into the Black Friday sale. So on top of everything going on, we actually had to email all our customers to tell them like there's going to be a slight delay. But we left Shopify as like available to sell during this time because we're like, we don't want to miss out on the sales, but we just told our customers like it's just going to be a few more days. So it was just such a manual period of time, but like I'm so glad we did it because when I look back at our financials, that Black Friday month, we did $1 million in sales, which was 30% of that year's sales.
Right.
So had we just decided not to do anything and left our factory in Vancouver, we would have like lost 30%.
Totally. And in the moment, what kind of were you feeling? Were you just in that, early startup mode years where you're like, okay, we're just in it? Were you aware of like, okay, this is really impressive, we're pulling it off? Was there any part of you that's just like, I'm so tired? Like, what was the main feeling going through all of that?
Yeah, so someone has asked me that before and they've asked like, were you scared? And I feel like me and Laura, or a very common question that we get asked is like, what's a time that you wanted to give up? Like, that's a very common question. And I feel like this is kind of like a similar one. And honestly, like we've never had any of those thoughts. And I don't know if it's just because like as an entrepreneur, you just have to be like, I don't know, like naively optimistic about everything. Otherwise you would never do this.
Yeah.
But thinking back to that time, I think it was just like okay, you gotta do what you gotta do. Like that's literally one of my catchphrases. And you just figure it out. So I remember when Laura called me when she was like, I think my uncle and my dad can do this. I was on a walk and I'm like, okay, like sounds good. What do you need from me? Like what can we do to make this happen? And at the end of that period, we like took them out for dinner, but like it was just more of like a celebratory, like, oh my God, we figured something out versus like oh my gosh, what are we going to do? What if nothing works?
Right.
Of course, there were periods of time where we were wondering, like, are we going to have to pay customs? Like, are they going to let her dad and uncle take the packaging from the warehouse, all these things. But we always told ourselves, okay, if something happens, we'll figure it out when that point comes. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like as entrepreneurs, you end up being so solution oriented and it's like a skill that really develops over time where it almost feels like you get to just, as long as you're willing to jump over the emotion, like instead of sitting in it being like, this sucks, if you just go, how are we solving it? I feel like you almost don't experience the negative emotions because by the time you have space to feel,
it's done.
It's done. And you've already solved it, right?
Yeah. And I think like going back to the company values, one of ours is hustle. And as part of hustle, our definition in our like internal guides is when you have a problem, come up with 3 solutions. And they don't need to be the right solutions. They just need to be 3 potential options instead of just being like, this is the problem. So I feel like that's just the way that we think. It's not like, okay, no problem can't be overcome. You just have to get creative.
I love that you said that. I literally have a thing called the 6 solutions theory, and it started as 3. We actually learned it through a real estate investor who spoke about having 3 exit plans whenever they buy a building. And and then I love that so much. And then in my own business and world, I kind of just like doubled it because
of course you would.
Of course. But I was like, okay, I really love this challenge, but it almost sometimes feels easy to get to the first 3. And I found when you try to get to 6, you do have to get out of the box and you have to throw out the thing that maybe you're like, is this a wacky idea or is this totally left field? And sometimes those are the solutions. And sometimes that comes in the first 3, right? Like I love how you guys default to, okay, do we have someone out west who could drive this thing, right?
Yeah.
But you just really have to force yourself to come up with those other solutions.
That reminds me of like the 5 whys where it's like you could just keep asking why,
Yes.
why. So you know what? Maybe I'll tell my team to double it to 6.
Yeah.
I'll be like, sorry, blame Mallory.
Yeah, exactly. Next time I see them, I'll just have straight faces from everyone. They won't want to talk to me. I'll be like, I'm so sorry. In that moment, the recurring theme I really see is that support system and really ultimately the teamwork of people who weren't even officially on the team, right? We have like the parents giving up their house, having all the team come over and work. We have, Laura's dad and uncle. We have actually the team members, which to be clear, if you're a team of 5, I'm assuming those roles maybe are marketing or social media, right? They're not hired to be doing packaging.
Yeah, absolutely not.
Yeah. Talk to me about what it feels like in your business, honestly, over the years to have that support system and how much you guys lean on that and what that really means to you.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think like especially for your early employees, you need to hire people that are willing to roll up their sleeves. Like you don't want to hire someone that's like, this is my job description. Like I was hired for this, because like, it's not like as a founder, you're trying to intentionally make people do things that aren't in their JD. Right. It's just that sometimes you just don't know what the role is going to evolve into. But like on the plus side of that, as an employee, that means that you can kind of like chart your own path. Like if you can put up your hand at work and be like, I'm really good at this, or like, let me help with this problem, that can open up new opportunities for you too. So like that's the first thing I'll say is like we always look for team members like that. And over the years, we still look for team members that are willing to do that. So like even if someone is hired to do like a really senior role, at photo shoots, they'll still be the ones like setting up props and like helping to tear it down. Like no one is above anything. And I actually think that starts tone at the top. Like Laura and I are so willing to roll up our sleeves. Like, I don't know, even if it's small things, like being the one to order the meal for the team, like after a live show. Like it's not like you delegate that to someone. I'm just
Right.
like, here, like pass my phone around, like who wants to order? Like, I don't know. I think that's really important. It's part of our company values. But the support, like over the years, Laura and I would not be here today without the support. And for the listeners, I think you will be surprised how much support you can get if you just ask. Like I remember in those beginning days before we even rebranded to Three Ships, Laura and I, because like we were just two 23-year-olds who had like no budget, no connections, no industry experience in beauty. So we just asked people for help. And like, you know, Laura's uncle is like a trademark lawyer. So like he like read over something. And like one of my friend's friends like was good at marketing and like could kind of like give us an idea if our marketing plan made sense. Like a lot of those things came to us. And then when we got investors, a lot of them became informal advisors almost because like they're literally invested in the company. They want to see it succeed. And like, I think along the way, Laura and I have also picked up other mentors from like other founders, or like literally mentors, like business coaches. And like in those beginning days, I would definitely say our family was like our biggest support system. Cause like even before the story of, you know, packing things in my parents' basement, after the first year and a half of running New Body, and Laura and I went full time with the business, we actually moved everything from my kitchen to my parents' basement for a year and a half. So like we were just making everything there. We were sleeping over at their house. Like they just like let us take over, and we literally would not have been able to get here had it not been for family support.
I love that. And I think you guys have a really nice balance of like resourcefulness, even when there's not necessarily the resources available. And I feel like both of you are really, really great at, you know, walking that line of being scrappy, but not necessarily being like cheap or like scarce, right? How do you walk that line in a space that I mean, something I know you guys are really proud of is your profitability over the years, and maybe you could speak to this as well. But I think that's really, you guys walking that fine line is how you're able to be profitable in what you do.
Yeah. Oh my God. That's such a good question. So I think at the end of the day, like you need to live and breathe your company values, and those will inform the decisions you make. So like on one hand, we have the hustle value, which is like definitely the scrappy value and like being resourceful. And like we have so many stories we can get into of that. But on the other hand, we have another company value, which is integrity. And for us, that means doing the right thing, especially when no one's looking. So not just when no one's looking, but like especially so. And one example I have is when we had moved manufacturing of our lavender toner, which RIP doesn't exist anymore. But at the time we were making it in my parents' basement, and then we moved it to like an actual outsourced manufacturer. When we gave them the ingredient list, they like followed everything. But we started to see customer reviews showing up on our D2C store saying like, oh, like the toner smells like socks. And we're like, that's wrong. It should smell like lavender.
Right.
And so we're like, wow, that's so weird. So we went to our manufacturer and we realized that even though they were using lavender water, it was a different supplier than what we were using before in my kitchen or in my parents' basement. So what we did is we changed the supplier, like obviously tested it again. And then even though it was more cost, we actually reached out to everyone who had purchased the toner in the last 6 months and offered them a free replacement. So like, that's an example where it's like, okay, it would cost you more money, but like the integrous thing to do is to make up for that for your customers. And like those customers will remember that forever.
Oh, huge.
Yeah. And like a lot of them replied being like, oh, I don't need one, but like, that's awesome, you know? So I think like being able to balance, you know, spending with profitability, I think you have to think about what like your values are, what your company long-term goals are. And then now getting to the profitability piece, it's like EBITDA is like the number one metric for us at Three Ships, and then followed by gross sales. But like EBITDA, I think is like the most important. And like honestly, it's because Laura and I have been in positions at the start of the company where we weren't profitable, and that was really scary to see yourself in the red, especially when there's like uncertainty. When you have a team. Like we take our responsibility so seriously that we're like literally accountable for over 20 people's salaries. Like being an unprofitable company, in our opinion, is just like not the right thing to do when you have to be responsible for people's salaries. So even though when we were talking to investors, a lot of them in 2022, when we were fundraising, were like, we would rather see more aggressive top line revenue growth and like not care about profitability. They were like, why? they kept saying like, why do you care about EBITDA? We were like, no, this is really important. And we ended up bringing on investors that did understand that and like, or were okay with it. And then it was so funny because then in 2023 or 2024, everything changed and all investors all of a sudden were like, oh my gosh, we love that you've been so focused on EBITDA. And a lot of companies were starting to go under because they weren't able to like fundraise anymore because maybe like the war broke out and like just like things change in the VC world. And so now I think like the number one piece of advice I would give to listeners if they have a small business is try your best to stay profitable because then you can chart your own destiny.
Oh, I love that. I feel like you guys have such cool things that have really stuck as you grow. And when you were talking about that, it's like not even that related, to be honest, but it made me think of it when you were talking about the investors. I remember hearing you and Laura talk about how you are 50-50 and how you really had to stand tall about that with investors. So kind of similar when you're talking about this of you want those investors that align, you guys really stand by the fact of, we're 50-50 co-founders. And that's actually, even though we hear co-founders a lot, it might not necessarily always be 50-50. Can you talk to us about why there's investor pushback on that?
Yeah.
And talk to us about the experience of standing by it.
Yeah, no, great question. I think that investors tend to feel nervous about 50-50 and like not having a CEO, like a one CEO, because they've seen so many examples where co-founders have a falling out. Like it's most co-founders end up falling apart, unfortunately. And if there's no one decision maker, then usually the company just ends up dissolving. And so I think that's why they push so hard to have one CEO. So at the end of the day, there's one final decision maker. But for Laura and me, like we know that we each bring such different things to the table, going back to the start of the conversation about how we're complete opposites. Like she is amazing at back end things because she's an engineer. Like she loves process. So she loves the financial side of the business, supply chain operations. She's the one who thought of the idea with her dad and her uncle. Versus for me, I'm like definitely the more extroverted one that like loves sales, anything customer facing. So I manage all our buyer relationships. I manage investor relationships, PR, things like that. And like the way that Laura and I operate is we know that whoever owns that domain has the final decision-making authority. So like, for example, if Laura's asking me questions about our 2027 product launch roadmap, and I'm like, I don't know how I feel about this product. I can tell her how I feel, but at the end of the day, she's the one who will decide, okay, I'm going to take that feedback or not. And going back to your question around trust, one of the words that we've used internally is aligned. So we'll say, are you aligned? And anyone in the team can say this. And then once that other person responds, yes, I'm aligned, it means move forward. Like we don't need to talk about this again. And I think it's important for two reasons. One is it lets you make decisions really fast because you're not like going back
having
and
the
forth
same conversation over and over.
Yeah, like once you see that word or you hear them say, you're like, okay, I can move on. Like I can go on to my next steps. And the second thing is it kind of like creates accountability because I think sometimes people will be like, oh, we made this decision before, and someone will be like, well, I said I was open to it, but like I didn't say like I was actually on board. Versus if you say that word, it's like a sacred word. So
I love
for
that.
me and Laura, going back to like being co-founders, we're just so clear on who has the final decision-making power that we've never felt the need to have one of us be CEO because we're co-CEOs.
And I love that standing in that when investors are pushing in that conversation. I think sometimes you can miss out on what feels like a really great opportunity with a specific investor, but it's always one of those things where then the right person comes along that really understands you guys and it's going to be the better partnership always.
Totally. And I think another thing is like most companies have a CEO, and for smaller companies, I think sometimes with co-founders, ego comes into play where someone usually is like, I want to be CEO because like it's like the top, big job. But like, I don't know, Laura and I never felt that way. Like we really try to put our egos aside with the business. And, I think that's been a big reason why we've been such a strong co-founder duo is like, we really understand each other. We like never try to put the other person down. And we also know that we always have the business's best interest at heart. So like if I disagree with something she's thinking, I know it's not because she's just trying to disagree with me. It's because she's like, I truly believe this is best for 3Chips product development.
It doesn't feel like anyone wants to be right for the sake of being right.
Yeah.
I love that we're seeing how a lot of companies, right, we see the values on the website, but we can really feel how your values are so integrated. And a big theme that's coming through with that, as I listen to how you interact with your team, is all of these meetings and the conversations and the communication between the team. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that, but I was mentioning this to you before when you spoke at a conference. The two of you were talking about how you have kind of like an accountability meeting together, and it's this pre-set up space to, give each other feedback, maybe ask questions. Can you tell us a bit about that meeting? Because I loved that concept.
Yeah, and I think our business coach gave us this idea. We meet every 6 weeks or so. It's like a recurring calendar invite. We never book over it. And it's just called like Connie Lo feedback conversation. And what we do is we share 2 pieces of like positive feedback that we've observed from the past 6-week period, and then 1 or 2, if you want, piece of constructive feedback. So the benefit of having this meeting in the calendar is it doesn't let resentment build up. Like before we brought this meeting into our calendars years ago, sometimes, maybe she might say something or I might say something, and then the other person's like holding on to it of like, why would they say that? Like, and like you just misinterpret it. Even with user guides, some things still fall through the cracks. Versus with this meeting, like, okay, I have an open space coming up in 3 weeks that I can talk about this. And in that meeting, we don't interrupt each other. So it's like if I'm giving her feedback, she'll listen and then she'll say like, thanks for the feedback. And then she can explain like her side if there is like something she wants to touch on, but it's never from a, you got this wrong. It's like okay, here's what my mind was, but like I can hear where you're coming from. I'm going to work on this.
Right.
And it's like honestly one of the best meetings that we have. And it's such a heartwarming one too, because you will tend to think like, oh, it's about constructive criticism or feedback. But most of the time it's actually like really positive of, recognizing each other for things. And like we can be so hard on ourselves that we might not even realize that we did something like well in the other person's eyes. And it's really nice to get that recognition and be like, oh my gosh, you're right. Like I did do a good job.
Yeah. And there's such an intimacy to co-founders that I'm sure you guys also see how they're growing as a leader, as a person. And it might be those small changes that they might not even realize in themselves, or maybe other team members aren't aware of what's going on internally, but you guys know that about each other. So you can speak to like, hey, I love how you're
okay. And then another way that you can like level up on this is
give it to us.
We have a book club. So every quarter we read a new book as a team. And one thing that we really like as a leadership team is like reading books that give us shared language for how we can talk about things in the company. And so this is a very granular example, but we read a book called Multipliers, which is really good. And in it, they were talking about how there's leaders that are multipliers, like they make things like better and bigger, and there's like diminishers. And there was this list of things called accidental diminishers, where it's like you're not trying to like, put people down, or you're not trying to like make things move slower, but like it happens because you have this tendency. And so we had this shared language. And I remember at one of our founder feedbacks, Laura was like, last week you were an accidental diminisher by being a rapid responder, which was a term from the book. Right. And rapid responder just means like you jump on things so fast that like other people can't do it in time. And so it actually takes away, like it disempowers them. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like that's such a good piece of feedback, because in my mind, I'm like, oh, I'm helping someone.
Right. By, like, I'm on it. I'm so quick. Yeah.
I want to show that I'm on it. And she was like, no, it's an accidental diminisher trait. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad we read that book, because it could have come across as being like more personal, like, why do you always jump on things? But it's like, you were just being a rapid responder. So yeah, have the feedback conversations and do a book club.
Yeah, I love the shared language concept. Even, I mean, my life partner is also my business partner in a lot of ways, but after that session, I was like, oh, we're totally doing this. Because to your point, if something maybe bothered you or you're just not sure, I think it actually, knowing that meeting is coming, it might even pull up those subconscious things that maybe you were never going to bring up because it didn't bother you enough. And maybe you have, the emotional intelligence level, and you know Laura enough to know, okay, she probably didn't mean that. But it's giving you that space to be like, hey, I actually should pay attention to what's happening.
It's so true. Yeah. And then also celebrating the wins that you might not have thought to be like, you did this like really well. So highly, highly recommend that. I was going to say something else and I forget. And then another thing for co-founder, like meetings and relationship building. And you might do this with your life partner, but Laura and I try our best to keep work things on Slack and then text for personal things, because we pretty much say we're married.
Right.
we have a baby together,
Yeah.
And so I find that a lot of partnerships, like work partnerships, struggle sometimes because they use both channels for both things. So like texting someone to be like, hey, did you check out this like brief that came in? And like you want to have that separation. So the only time Laura and I will text each other about something work related is if like we're meeting up for something, or like someone's running late for something, or if it's super urgent. But like try to keep that separation. Do you do the same thing with your partner?
No, but that's only because like we don't have big enough team. Like I
true,
have a
that's true.
virtual assistant that we're not actually communicating in a different spot, but we will do it in terms of I'm very vocal of like, hey, I'm not in work mode right now.
That's good,
Because we
yeah.
have a balance of sometimes when we go for a walk, we'll talk business the whole time and we'll be dreaming together and like having fun with it. And then other times I'll be like, I actually need this walk to be completely
Yeah.
checked out and just life partners on a walk looking at
love
the bird
that.
or whatever.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah, I think that's an important one, is to be able to differentiate whether it's those physical spaces or not.
Yeah, it's very self-aware.
Yes, because for us, I mean, the space does overlap. It's like sometimes the pillow talk in bed is
Yeah.
about like the content idea I have and we're okay with that. And then other times we're just very clear of like, you can nip it right away if it's not feeling right. Okay, so when we go back to that moment, I feel like what I love is that it's just an example of how you guys fixed it, moved on, continued to do that. Now, as a company, you guys do over 16 million in revenue, correct?
Yeah, we
That's
did over 16 last year in 2025.
absolutely incredible. I find in this space, how did you guys learn along the way? Is it just continuing to hit those obstacles in the road, like the highway situation, or how do you go from, those early kitchen days to 16 million in revenue?
I mean, not to bring this back to values, but like bring it back to values.
It's at your core.
Yeah, one of our company values is curiosity. And it's because Laura and I are both very curious people. Like, we are people that are interesting, I hope, and interested in life. And like, those are the types of people we want to hire. So like, we don't want to hire people who are just about work. Like, and it's great to have interests outside of work that you could bring into work anyway and like bring a unique twist on, a problem that you're facing at work. But the reason I think that we've been able to grow so fast over the years is like we're constantly just intaking new learning. We're always listening to podcasts. So like Acquired is one that we both really like. It's kind of like a more extensive How I Built This. But in the beginning days when we were making products by hand, we would just play How I Built This on loop and just listen to stories of how people started. And like A, was super motivating, but B, like it gave us a lot of ideas.
You know what I love about that show is it shows so many different types of founders, because often we'll see maybe the extroverted founder or the one who is like maybe the David Goggins type who's just going to push through anything they hit. But I find that show is a really nice example of here's all the different ways you can be a founder.
Totally. And like some of my favorite episodes are ones that I didn't think I was going to like. Because like I find the most interesting ones, or the ones I would find most interesting, are like product-based ones, because you can relate to it. Like, oh, I've eaten that before or something. But a lot of the tech ones are really interesting. So anyways, Laura and I both love learning. And we both like taking notes on things that we learn. And when you're just like constantly learning, I think that you look at the world through a different lens, because do you know what the reticular activating system is?
No.
It's called RAS for short. And I remember my life coach years ago taught me about this, where she's like, when you're manifesting or visualizing, you're using something called the RAS, and it's where you're training your brain to look for something. So a common example that people give is like, let's just say your friend tells you, oh my gosh, I just bought a red Jeep. And all of a sudden you start seeing them everywhere. It's not like there's more red Jeeps on the road. It's just you start to like train your mind to look for them.
Right.
It's the same thing with when you're learning. I feel like Laura and I, because we're always like reading, listening to podcasts, talking to people, networking, we are like applying those learnings to problems that we're facing. Because like, we might get a new problem, but I'll be like, oh, I remember that the CEO of this like $100 million company said that he did this in a slightly similar situation. We could try that. So that's one thing. We're also part of like different groups. So like we have founder groups. I'm also part of this group where it's like a Zoom group where they bring in founders of large companies and they share kind of off the record learnings that they've had. So I do that once a month. Like, I think that it's all about learning.
Yeah.
And I think also putting your ego aside again and knowing like you're not going to know everything. So hiring people that are better than you and smarter than you. Like Laura and I never want to be the smartest people in the room, because then that means that like you're not growing fast enough. So bringing the right people into the company and having the right mentors around you and leaning on them.
Yeah, you've mentioned a few different coaches, and you guys working with a business coach, life
Therapist.
coach. Yeah, how has coaching come into play for either you on your own or you and Laura?
Yeah. I think that like coaching is the best investment that you can make in yourself, other than like anything in your health. And I like, for example, I got into therapy over 10 years ago, 11 years ago now, like when I first graduated from university. And I remember the time, like it was still kind of a taboo topic. But I feel like when you invest that time and money into yourself and talk to a professional, they can help you unlock so much that you just didn't know that you had or didn't know about yourself because you just didn't have the right tools or the right mindset. And like it takes a professional to help you with that. And so Laura and I share a business coach that actually is one of our investors. And well, he ended up investing after because he believed in us so much from like our conversations, which is so nice.
Yeah.
So we meet him once a month. I also had a life coach a few years ago before COVID, actually, when I was like making the jump from full time to like working on this business, just to like make sure that I was showing up as the best version of myself. So yeah, I think coaching is really important. And like, I know for listeners, sometimes you might think coaching is like unattainable because it can cost a lot of money. But there's lots of online resources that you can find. Like there's Masterclass, there's Skillshare, ChatGPT, like LLMs, like ChatGPT. Like you can enter a prompt that's like pretend that you are the world's best coach and insert maybe a certain coach that you're trying to make your LLM sound like, and then this is the problem. Like, what would you recommend I do and speak in this person's voice? Like that's one example of how you can use a free resource and get some coaching.
Totally. Yeah. I just went through, I think it was 14 prompts for whatever AI you want to use. But ideally, if it's a space where you've already been inputting stuff, you've been maybe brainstorming, whatever it might be, and it just basically read you to filth. It was in the best way. It was like, hey, based on everything I'm saying, you know, like what's advice I give other people that I don't follow myself? What do I judge in others that might be a mirror? Ooh, and I don't even feel that I feed my ChatGPT that much information, but it was really telling, and there was these themes that kept coming through for me, and it was something that, you know, sometimes you do an exercise and days, like, you don't think too much of it, but days later, weeks later, it's sitting more and more, and you're like, wow, that actually has really impacted me, and I'm changing going forward based on what it read about me.
Yeah, it's so true. They know us so well, it's freaky.
It honestly is. I wanted to ask you, recently you guys launched a new collection, we'll call it. Forgive me, I forget what you call it.
So wellness, like the intention cards?
Oh, that too.
Oh, okay.
But I wanted to ask you about the
Nothing wasted collection.
Nothing wasted. I was like, it's going to come to me. I think this is a really beautiful example of that, what we were talking about, that scrappiness, but so value aligned, where it feels like a win for you guys, I'm assuming, because if you're not familiar with the collection, it's essentially selling products where the packaging has small errors, flaws. And so for you, you get to sell more product, but for the customers, like the second I saw that, I was immediately browsing. Like, I do not care if there's a little fade on a font. Like,
totally.
Tell me about where that idea came from.
Okay, so this is a great example of bringing in team members that are curious, because this was actually not Laura nor my idea. It was our R&D associate, our senior R&D associate's idea, because she was the one that like manages a lot of the back end, and she was seeing that our warehouse was having to throw a lot of product that was like otherwise good. Like the formula is totally fine. The expiry is like the typical expiry. It's just when it arrived from our manufacturer, there's a dent in the box, or like, again, a slight scuff, and you don't want to give that to a retailer or a customer. And she was the one who put up her hand at one of our weekly power syncs on Monday. And because we have a section of the power sync called like to discuss, or like pretty much like brainstorm. So again, that's something your listeners can do, is just like give that open forum to your team. And she was the one who's like, okay, we have all this leftover product. What do we think about selling it for a discount? And then it ended up being this big conversation, because like on one hand, the team's like, like, will that then make people trade down to buying things? Like they would have bought a full price thing before.
Right.
But at the end of the day, going back to values, sustainability is one of our top values. And then also like making sure the customer has a great experience is super important to us. And the Nothing Wasted collection hit both of those.
Yes.
And what we didn't expect is that would be so successful. And also that would lead to so much press. So I think like overall win-win-win. And like neither Laura nor I can take credit for it, but like such a great idea. And we've already done, I think, 3 or 4 drops now. And we diverted, like, I don't have the number for you off the top of my head, but like thousands of pounds of waste from landfills.
I love that. I think it really speaks to that alignment piece. And it's one of those things where I remember the second you guys launched it, I was like, oh, I'm already so obsessed with them, and I like them so much more for doing this, you know? And it lets customers connect with that value and say, hey, like, maybe if I had a product business, that is something I would want to do, and I can appreciate it.
Totally. And like, I would encourage other small businesses or businesses to do this too. Like, like, I think it's such a good idea, and you can make more money and like just feel good about doing it. So I highly, highly, highly recommend it to other founders.
Yeah, and it's a cool way for new customers to try something out. Maybe they're eyeing it, they don't quite want to budget for it, they can try it on cheap. Or for myself, it's like, I know I love the jelly drops, the eye mask, and if I see that, I don't need the perfect packaging, right?
Totally, I agree. Or if you're an existing customer, you want to try something new, but you're like, I usually buy the jelly drops, but I never tried the Skin Hero serum, but like it's 25% off, I'll just get it.
Mm-hmm. One thing I haven't heard you speak too much about is resilience, but I feel like that is such a theme for you guys. I know we touched very briefly on Laura even getting diagnosed with a brain tumor, which I know she's not here to speak to you right now, but I can't help but think of that word when I see you guys. And I think that's why when we talk about a moment like that product not coming from the West Coast and you guys having to solve that, it feels like no individual moment can break you guys. Do you feel that?
Yeah, I definitely think resilient is a word that Laura and I use to describe ourselves and our team. And like, I don't know if it's just the way that we were raised. Like, I was raised by immigrant parents that like came here with $2,000. Like, if they can figure it out,
girl.
like if they can raise 2 kids and like figure it out, like nothing is going to be too hard for me. Like when I think about what my parents went through, like this is nothing compared to it. And I think maybe it's just having that perspective. And same thing with Laura, like her dad's an entrepreneur and like her mom's a doctor and like she saw them like work so hard when she was growing up. So like, I think that's a big part of it. I think like, life is always going to have hard things, but you choose your hard. And like the hard that we chose is being entrepreneurs, which like is very hard at times, like up and down every day. But like, as long as you put things in perspective, and I think Laura's health diagnosis honestly was one of the biggest things that put everything in perspective, because at the end of the day, no matter how stressed we are, we're like, at least it's not our health. So like, even though it was a really terrible thing that happened, we're both actually grateful for having gone through it together. I think every entrepreneur though is resilient. Like every successful entrepreneur is resilient.
I think it's something that just ends up being baked in.
Yeah. Do you know what the trough of sorrow is, or that term?
No.
It's like, I don't know who coined it, probably someone in the tech world, but like a lot of people will start a business and they're like, oh my God, it's going so well. Cause like you get your first couple of customers, or maybe your first 1,000 customers. And then you hit a plateau and you're like, like you're trying everything that worked before and nothing's working. And a lot of people stop when they like, spend a year in the plateau and like they fall off or they close the business.
Yeah.
But then if you just keep pushing through and you're resilient, all of a sudden you hit that like that breaking point or that tipping point, and then your business starts to see that hockey stick growth or something that looks more hockey stick. And that in between period of that plateau is called the trough of sorrow, because it's like that's the period where people can't make it through, or the people who can't make it through don't end up seeing the other side.
Right. I remember hearing a quote last year that was, if you were 30 failures away from success, how quickly would you fail?
Totally.
And I think that's one that's really stuck with me, because sometimes people think I'm trying to build this skincare company. We hit a roadblock. It feels like it's failing, but it's only failing if you quit. Like that's the only surefire way to make it end. If you can push through, then sometimes judging that failure is actually just you in the middle of succeeding.
100%. Or like a lot of people don't want to hear no's. They're like, oh my gosh, like it's like failure. But like a no, especially from a buyer, is actually good, because then you start to understand their objections. Like if they just don't say anything, or they're like, yeah, like I'm interested, and then they just like kind of like don't say anything else after that, you don't actually learn anything. If you get a no, then you can figure out how to pivot. I learned that from a book called Never Split the Difference.
I was gonna say I don't know if this is coincidence or not, but Chris Voss covers that so well, and he calls it a counterfeit yes too. Like, what's the point of a counterfeit yes if it's just someone saying yes because they feel uncomfortable saying no? Like, it's better to get to the no, find out the hesitations, and then move forward, right?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite books.
Same. I find for anyone who feels uncomfortable with sales especially, it gets you a lot more comfortable with getting to know. That's what he talks about a lot, is like, how can you actually make an effort to get to the no?
Yeah, it's so important. And I always recommend it to anyone who's like getting into sales, or even just wants to get more comfortable in life. Like, and I love the way that he structured the book with all the different hostage situations, just like a very entertaining read.
Totally. Yeah, interesting life for sure. Very much. So many of these characteristics we're talking about, it really feels like you've had them since day one, but I'm sure inside it probably doesn't feel like, hey, since day one, I've been crushing this. Like, I have all the qualities an entrepreneur needs. How do you feel like you've changed the most as a founder over the years?
Oh, wow. I feel like the biggest way I've changed is self-confidence. I mean, and I think that comes partially from just being older. Because, like, again, Laura and I were in our early 20s when we started, but I really lacked self confidence in those beginning days. I was constantly doubting my decisions when we were starting, especially since, like, we'd never done it before. Versus now, even though the problems that we're facing are arguably much bigger and
Right.
a lot harder, I think because I've picked up so many, like, I've gone through so many problems along the way, I know I can do it. Like, no matter what the issue is, like, I know I can figure it out. And, like, I also think, and this is one of my favorite quotes, self-confidence is keeping the promises you make to yourself.
Ooh,
And you can apply that in so many things, whether it's, like, you know, living a healthier life, or, like, promising yourself that you're going to, like, call your parents, and, like, actually keeping up with that. Like, that builds self-confidence. And, like, you can't cheat yourself of it. Like, you can't, like, fake self-confidence. You can fake a little bit of it,
Right,
but, like,
right.
it's not going to work.
It won't
long
feel
term.
the same.
No. And so, like, keeping the promises, like, you know, in those beginning days when Laura and I were making products in my kitchen, like, having to turn down so many fun times with other friends to, like, go on trips, or, like, you know, hang out at the bar or whatever, and, like, Laura and I are just working Saturday night making products, like, that is, like, one notch in our belt. And then, like, you amass so many of those along the way. And I think that's been the biggest change for me, is that self-confidence through those experiences.
I love that. It's like collecting the data points over the
Yeah.
year. At some point, you have to start believing the proof that you're
Yeah.
seeing over and
Yeah.
over.
And, like, I forget if I mentioned this in the conference that you were at, but one of the ways that I also built my self-confidence and get over imposter syndrome is, like, a Google Drive folder I have called Personal Wins. Did I talk about this? So because I knew that in my early 20s, I had a lot of imposter syndrome, especially starting this with no beauty experience, being just two consumers. I started this thing on my Google Drive called my Personal Wins, and I would just screenshot any examples, or, like, write in a note on a Google Doc in that folder, anything that was an example of something I did well. So, like, it could be something like a buyer emailing me and being like, you guys are number one, like, this week, like, go you, or something, or, like, a screenshot of us taking over a retailer homepage banner or something, or even, like, small things like a customer review that I really, really liked. And I save them to the folder, and I actually name the file with the date and the description. So it'll be like 2026-02-19, like, Brighter Days Eye Mask review. And this is so great because it trains you to see the world in a way where you're, like, trying to look for your wins,
Right.
and that builds confidence.
It's looking for the red Jeep, right?
Yeah, right? Yeah, your reticular activating system.
There we go.
And then the other thing is, when you're feeling down, you have this folder that you can go to of, like, happy moments that you can just, like, flip through and be like, oh my God, I am a badass.
Yes.
And then the third thing that I didn't realize until I had done this for a couple of years is, when you look at the wins from a few years ago, like, I have a screenshot of our team when we were 4 people. And I thought that was a huge win of a Zoom call. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, like, that was a win for me back then. And we're a team of over 20. Like, and it doesn't diminish the win from years ago, but it just puts things in perspective, and I can see the growth.
Yeah.
So I highly recommend it for your listeners if they're, like, struggling with confidence, or just trying to, like, document their journey more.
I love that. I heard someone speaking recently about similar, but almost the flip. They put the struggles that they're having in their business, or times that they really felt like they were losing. They'll put it in their calendar at a future date. And then by the time that date comes, every time they feel so silly of how big it felt, and realizing, like, oh, I'm like 6 deals past that. And, like, I thought everything was going to crumble at that point. And it's just been something they've baked in that's really reminded them of, like, every time in the moment it feels so big. And then later you're like, there's no issue.
So do they just pick, like, a date?
Yep,
6
they just
months
pick a
out,
day, like,
kind of?
3 months, 6
and then
months.
they're like, oh, I was worried about this.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Lost
so
this big
smart.
client over this.
Oh my gosh. I love that. Or, like, it reminds me of the quote, you know, if it doesn't matter in 5 years, don't spend more than 5 minutes thinking about it.
Right.
Something that I used to do, and then I stopped recently just because I was like, you know what, I don't think I need this tool anymore, is every week I used to document my stress levels out of 10, things I was really grateful for, things I did well, and, like, things that were stressful. And I think it's the same thing when I was looking through, because it was just in Excel week by week, and I was looking through some of the things that really stressed me out, like, 6 months ago. I was like, wow, like, that wasn't a big deal. Like, I remember one of our team members left and, like, we ended on great terms, but I was like, oh no, like, I need to backfill her, and, like, I haven't done this job in so long. What if I, like, mess up? And it was like, you know, in the people side, I'm like, I need to make sure I do payroll right. Like, it was so important to me back then, and I figured it out in, like, a week, you know? So.
Yeah, and documenting it is so important, because we are having so many experiences as founders, and we're moving so quickly that even though you've grown past it, it's worth taking that minute to realize, like, oh, I did think that was a really big deal.
Yeah.
And in the
so
end,
true.
I conquered it, right?
Yeah.
I think with you guys building such a massive business, and truly, I would say a short amount of time. I don't know if it maybe feels long to you.
It's been 84 years.
You got like dust. But I think that especially for women, I love to see these examples of women who are going after things that are bigger and that maybe aren't a space that are familiar to them. What kind of advice would you give to someone that's, whether they have started or maybe they are halfway into their journey? What kind of advice would you have for someone that has these really big aspirations?
Okay, so one more like tangible, small piece of advice I would give for someone that is side hustling right now that Laura and I wish we did is get a credit card and like max out get a like large limit if you can and a line of credit, because we didn't do this. And then when we quit our full-time jobs and didn't pay ourselves a salary, we didn't have a salary to bring to the bank to be like, give us credit.
Right.
So it's good to do this when you still have your 9 to 5 and a salary to use. So like that's one like tactical piece of advice I would give. But like for women that are like earlier in their journey or like growing, I would say like don't wait for the perfect moment. I feel like women tend to lean a little more perfectionist than at least the men in my life, definitely. I wish my husband were more of a perfectionist.
Excuse me, your husband is going to listen to this later and know that was Tim.
He's like, the pancake good enough, like put it on the table. But I think like when you wait to make something perfect, you can end up waiting like months or years. And then in that time, you could have launched, or like in that time, if you didn't, competition could have come. So when Laura and I started, we set ourselves an arbitrary date of launching 3 months after the first day we met. Wow. So we met November 2017, and we set ourselves a launch date of Valentine's Day 2017, and
which is kind of crazy because also over the holiday season, who gets anything done?
No. We were working. I was writing blog posts. Yeah, I was like building our Instagram, commenting on people's posts. And then we end up launching one day after that deadline. So March 15. But I think like that's really important. And Reid Hoffman, one of the co-founders of LinkedIn, he says, if you're not embarrassed by the first version of your product, then you launch too late. So like don't wait for the perfect version. Mm-hmm. And I'd highly like recommend that for all your listeners. I also think as women, we can struggle with taking up space. And like 2% of VC funding goes to women, things like that. Like those stories, or like 2% also of women-owned businesses break, I think, 1 million in sales. Mm-hmm. And so like those numbers can feel disheartening, but just know that in today's day and age, there's so many more resources, and like women want to help each other. And I think like actually more men are open to helping women as well now. Yes. There's a lot of government grants available for women. So like there are things that you can use to your advantage. So don't be afraid to like put yourself in the room and like knock on the investor doors and do all the things. Cause like if you don't put yourself out there, no one will know how great you are. And I think that's something that Laura and I have done pretty well, is like we've never been afraid to get a no. Again, going back to the no's.
Yeah, no, I love that. What's the best way for people to either shop from you guys, connect with you? Where can we find you guys?
Yeah, I would say shopping 3shipsbeauty.com is the easiest place. And our store locator's on there too if you want to check out our retailers. I would say like Whole Foods, Credo Beauty in the US Detox Market, Well.ca in Canada, Halt Run for your good ones with more full assortments. And then for following us at 3shipsbeauty on Instagram, I'm on Instagram at It's Connie Lo. And then Laura's is Laura.A. Thompson.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Thanks, Mallory. That was such a fun combo.